Yeah, I'm going to talk today about giving respect. Recently, Tina and I were blessed and we were able to go to Montego Bay in Jamaica for the Feast of Tabernacles this year. We had really good, thought-provoking messages. We had Steve Myers there on the first and eighth day. I was able to be the song leader on the first and eighth day, so that was really a treat. Jamaica is an interesting country. It's a little island out there in the Caribbean, and it has what I'm going to call an old world connection to God. God is not an if to them. It is a who. They know God exists. God is real. They pray. And also, it's kind of interesting. They have the knowledge of the seventh-day Sabbath down there. It seems that the Seventh-day Adventists over the years have done their work down there, for the only time of salvation, and, try to get people convert. And, what happens down there is many are sharing a story of, I understand the Sabbath, I agree with the Sabbath, but you know what? I can't keep the Sabbath because of work. It's like the proverbial seed that is scattered in stones and never able to take root. It's a first world country. No, we're a first world country. They're a third world country. They have a hard time traveling. And what's interesting when you go there, we have our Americana and we know our history. Their history is different, obviously, and there's a lot of their roots that are in Africa, and even in the foods they eat, some of that comes from Africa. So Tina and I, we like to be the proverbial ambassadors for Christ when we're there. We like to talk to the local people when we travel. We've gone to Greece and made friends with the tour gal that was walking with us, and in the Middle East, we kind of got into trouble, pretending to speak Arabic and getting into conversations with people when we didn't know what they were saying. But this was easy. They speak English for the most part down there, but they do have another dialect that is Portuguese, Spanish, and English together. Friends we met down there. We got to know a little young man. He's like 24 years old, Kamoy, and he worked in the restaurant, and he would get us extra bags of tea and such. There was Crystal. She was a concierge up front, and she would arrange our dinners and such. And then we met Gina. Now, if any of you know who Aretha Franklin is, so Aretha Franklin in the 1960s, she was a good-looking woman. Well, Gina looks just like Aretha Franklin. It's crazy. I looked at some old pictures, and they look a lot alike. And then there was this other guy that he had a really fixed-up Subaru, and he was always bragging about going 200 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that means in miles per hour, but his name was Gas. And, we took time to stop and talk to these folks. We had Gina and Crystal. Actually, we had them up on the room on the Sabbath, and, we had some popcorn and Cheetos and soft drinks and, got to talk about things, and we got to understand more about how their country works. It was a one-on-one situation. Now, Tina, she liked to go out there in the water. She liked to talk to these guys that were in the little canoes, selling tidbits of wooden carvings and beads, and most of the things that you really don't need but you bring home as a souvenir. And there were interesting characters out there. These guys, they have their marketing thing pretty well done. It's like they wear the same hat and same shirt every day, because that way, if you're a tourist, you'll recognize, the different people. There's a guy, he had his little green suit on. Another guy had a Canadian flag. Another guy had an American flag. And they're kind of interesting. One person we met, his name was AK, and he beaded things, made some custom stuff. And there was another guy. This guy was crazy. Sambo. We just don't hear that name here in the United States very often, but that's what his friends named him, because they took his other name away and gave it to somebody else. They're interesting. Carlene was a housekeeper. We see her, in the hallways, and then we also met Camille. she was very interesting. She was the owner of the spa there. And next thing you know, I comment about her name sounding like Camilla, the queen consort, I guess you call her. Next thing you know, she's pulling out pictures. Oh yeah, here's me and Prince Charles, and I had drinks with Camille, and so there's different ends of the spectrum. This gal was in the prime minister's office. She had connections inside the prime minister's office. So got to listen to stories of faith, mercy, grace from these people. We got to exhort those same wonderful attributes of God. The food was top end. However, it's interesting in our conversations, the staff, they never get to eat any of the food that the guests get to eat. They get to go to what they call the canteen, and most of them rather bring their own lunch than eat at the canteen. So what do we got here? Poverty. Poverty and a bubble of security. So we're in this resort, and it's gorgeous. I mean, the lawns are mowed, everything's painted nice, the flowers are pretty, and they got the sounds and the music. But outside the gate, there was like extreme poverty going on out there. And we're very pleased that to be able to keep a Feast of Tabernacles in a place of safety where it was truly millennial. And it's good that we're able to use our second tithe and for that week of time, spend a tenth of our income and act and perhaps appear rich on the blessings. And it was important to be kind and considerate to these folks. I mean, I know the brochure said, tips included, but really, can you give them $1 or $2? I mean, that was good. I mean, these folks are pretty poor. I mean, they don't have a style of living like we do. There was a kid when we were getting ready to leave, and this was a poor kid just emptying the trash buckets. And, it came in my mind, it's like, man, I should do something for this guy. And, if your mind says do it, because that is that work of faith that you're doing. It's just like, well, I wish I could give you $5. Go give him $5. And, that kid would never get a tip from anybody. So kindness was on our agenda, and respect was on our agenda. We always had to look out for the scammers. You got to be really careful when you're traveling internationally. And we heard stories, they confided in us. It's like, they teach us that, when you see soft-hearted Christians, it's like you work it up. It's like, oh, please pray for me, and, the tips will start flowing. I mean, that's the theory. But what we really want to know and do is use wisdom and discernment when talking to strangers, and even if they are in hotel uniforms. But I guess the bottom line is sometimes we all have to break out of our comfort zones, and we need to say hello to strangers as appropriate, the waiter, the cashier, even in our daily life, the pharmacist or the person at the grocery store putting stuff in your bag, your neighbor. And this is how we're able to start demonstrating God's Spirit that is in us. We can go out and preach on a soapbox, or we can have a cable or a webcast, and we can start proclaiming, and we can give you the best sermon in the world that you've ever heard. But unless your heart is moved to live out that belief in front of real people, your preaching is in vain. It's love is the primary focus that we're supposed to do here. So let's consider for a moment a story in the book of Acts. This is in Acts 3, verses 1 through 10. And this is a story of a man who was miraculously healed by just the eye-to-eye contact with John and Paul. So Acts 3, verses 1 through 10. Now Peter and John went up together to the temple at the hour of prayer, the ninth hour. And a certain lame man who came from his mother's womb that way. He was born handicapped. And he was carried over and laid daily at the gate of the temple, which is called Beautiful, to ask alms, to beg from those who entered the temple. And when he saw Peter and John about to go in the temple, he said, "Please, sir, can you give me something?" And fixing his eyes on him with John, Peter said, "Look at us. Look at us." So he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something as a reward. But Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." And he took him by the right hand and lifted him up, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. So he, leaping up, stood and walked and entered the temple with them, walking, leaping, and praising God. And all the people saw him walking and praising God, and they knew that it was he. They knew it was him. They knew it was that man that had been out that step for all these years, the one sat begging at the Beautiful gate at the temple, and they were filled with wonder and amazement what had happened to him. It is Peter and John, they locked eyes with this individual and they changed that person's life. We have that ability to do that as well. So let's reflect by considering 4 practical steps and discover the choices made in these fleeting moments of any encounter. So the first step, embrace your personal sphere of influence. Each of us have what we may call centers of influence. We have people that we're always seeing and around. And let's be realistic. We can't meet everybody we run into. We can't talk to every single person we run into. We can't interact with the whole world at once. We just don't have that ability. And even Jesus, he ultimately would deliver to all the people the message of his kingdom. He didn't meet them all at once during his life. He met them a lot of times, one-on-one. And he did take personal responsibility for those directly in his path, didn't he? One person, one heart at a time. He never shied away in dealing with people in an intimately focused manner with real concern, real eye-to-eye contact. And most of his encounters, you're going to find that they're not written about him talking in the synagogues or in the temple, but it's about he was on the road or in the meadow at a dinner at a sinner's house. But his heart was always leaning forward. You want to be interested in somebody. You want to let them know that you're interested in what they're talking about. Lean forward when they're talking to you. Start, give them some body movement, some body contact, some body language to let them know, yes, I'm listening and I am interested in what you have to say. We're a small group, but God has given us a huge target-rich environment to personally witness the fact that Christ lives within us, is within our heart. Jesus lived in a slower-paced society. I like to say that humanity's speed was 3 or 4 miles per hour. They walked a lot. They didn't have horses or carts. Most of them were riding. They were walking and had their, mule or somebody, hauling the stuff with them. And the pace of life and distractions were much different than they are today. But the greatest distraction of all, you can think, there's cows over here and there's, farms and stuff. That may be a distraction, but the biggest distraction is ourselves. It's about our self-centeredness and resisting to love other people. A vital key in remaining alert and ready to learn is simply heed what God says. And he says, and this our pastor's told us this many times, says, be still and know I am God. Sometimes you just have to close your mouth and listen. strive with God's guidance and spiritually pace ourselves in serving as his witness. We need to ask God to develop in us a sense of anticipation and excitement that we're going to meet somebody. And we're just going to be nice to somebody. Sometimes I get phone calls. I get a lot of salespeople calling me, from different investment houses. And man, I know these guys are used to just being hung up on. I don't got time, dang. And I'll give them a couple minutes and say, I'm not interested, but I know it's a lot of work to make all these phone calls and these people are really rotten to you. So I just want to say, have a nice day. It doesn't take a long, and it's like, and I can't tell you how many times I go, you made my week. It's like I've been calling. Nobody's nice at all. We can be nice. It doesn't cost us anything to be nice. All right, so step 2, approach all people with a Christ-like heart because we are the sons and daughters of God. Every human being is made in God's image and is a potential spiritual child. You don't know who's going to be out there. At the feast, there was a big resort. You didn't know who was a church member and who wasn't a church member. You had to really behave yourself. Otherwise, you could stand out. In Matthew 9, 35 through 38 describes something that was in Jesus' path. And he was going about teaching in the cities. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them because they were weary and scattered with sheep without shepherd. That's going to be 99.9% of the people we find out there. They're going to be the scattered people that really have no direction. God speaks of having the love of God, which is poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. Well, I like to turn to Galatians 3 and add to that thought. In Galatians 3, verses 26 through 29, way at the end, says, "For you are all sons of God through faith in Jesus Christ. For as many of you were baptized into Christ have put on Christ." So that's like me putting on the suit. It's like I put on who Christ is. That is now who I am. I'm not a guy in a suit. I'm now the attitude of Jesus Christ. And we wear that. And says there is neither Jew nor Greek, and there is neither slave nor free. Well, there is neither, vendors out in the ocean or, millionaires sitting at a club. We're all male or female, and all of us are one in Christ. And we can show that love to them. And it says, if you are Christ, then you're Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. We're ambassadors for Jesus Christ. In all the things we do, we are representatives of Jesus Christ. I had a job once. I was a registered representative for the company. I sold their products. Well, we are representatives of Jesus Christ, and his product is salvation. So we can also look at step 3. Focus as Jesus did on those in your path. Scriptures tells us that God has given us a seeing eye and a hearing ear. That's from Proverbs 10, verse 12. But we just don't use our eyes to a full spiritual advantage due to the rush of life. A lot of us, we'll wear dark sunglasses. Even if I go up Habit in Redlands, California, where we have our church service, there's a Wendy's on the corner. Best burgers in town, Wendy's. But, I go through the drive-thru, I take off my glasses, and I'll look eye to eye at the people instead of just being this anonymous smarty butt with dark sunglasses on. I don't care about you, give me my food attitude. Every single time, every single person that is put in front of you, you have this opportunity. And the eye is a mirror of the soul and those who cross our path. That's kind of a hard to understand. Well, why is the eye so important? Well, my mother, believe it or not, is 99 years old, and her eyes are pretty fogged up. And it really matches her understanding of the world and life that she lives in. It's dark and hazy, And, compared to, Mr. Visine over here, I put the stuff in my eyes, so my eyes are nice and white and they look bright, but it makes a difference. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. The bright eyes, and people see that you're alert and you're not tired and worn out. It gives an impression to them. But Jesus had that problem. He actually didn't have the problem, but he was passing through Jericho, and Zacchaeus, the tax collector, he had the problem. He was a man that they say was small in stature. I like to say he was under tall. And this guy, he ran ahead and climbed into a sycamore tree so he could see the Lord pass by. And when Jesus came by, he said to him, "Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must stay at your home." Wow, I get to have the Savior, Christ, come to my house? And he made haste and came down from the tree, and he joined them. But then when the crowd saw it, they go, "I can't believe it. He's going to the house with him. He's a sinner. He's a tax collector. You know how much he took from me last time he came around? And Jesus is going to go have dinner with them?" And Zacchaeus stood still and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, I gave half my goods to the poor." You're supposed to do these things in secret. If you do them openly, then that's the reward you get from the thanks of men. If you do it quietly, you get thanks from God. "I gave half my goods to the poor, and if I've taken anything from anybody by false accusation, I restored it fourfold." That's very generous. That's very generous. And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost." And in there going to Jamaica, talking to all these strangers, not in the church, obviously not in the church. We want to give them some hope. You got to imagine the smile that Jesus had, being with Zacchaeus. Our pastor, Robin Weber, in this topic suggests that more than the eyes that met on this road, they met hearts. And that's really our objective, to meet hearts. So step 4, whoever comes your way, give God the glory. It's not about you. It's not about where you work, who you know. It's about God's glory and the blessings he has given you. Jesus never took the glory for himself, but he directed praise for his works towards God the Father. And he set that example. He said, "Most assuredly, I say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself. Howard can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do, and whatever he does, the Son does in like manner." That's our ultimate example. And Jesus demonstrated the great understanding that praise should mainly be directed upward towards God on high. There's a Psalm of David, Psalm 86. It's, "Teach me your way, O Lord. Teach me your way. I'll walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. I will praise you, O Lord my God, with all my heart, and I will glorify your name." That should be tattooed on our forehead. But it all comes down to the bottom notion here of respect. In walking and talking to these people in Jamaica, it was about respect. In Jesus Christ calling Zacchaeus down from the tree, it was about respect. Dictionary defines respect as to consider worthy of high regard and esteem. Well, in Philippians 2:3, it talks about esteeming others better than ourselves, to look low on ourselves and high towards others. The points of this message, to embrace your personal sphere of influence, to approach with a Christ-like heart. Focus on the path you're walking on. And whoever comes your way, give God the glory. But in finishing this message, I want to go back to Jamaica. My head is still stuck in Jamaica. It was such a fine feast. But Tina would go out there and would talk to the vendors out there, and, they'd be beating and stuff, and people would walk by. There was a pretty long beach. And the vendor, AK, he'd say, "Hey, how you doing? We got something over here. How you doing, man? Have a nice day," or something. And, the person walking by wouldn't even turn his head and look at him. Wouldn't even acknowledge him at all. And AK turns to Tina and says, "That man, no respect." But, in talking to us, we would get the fist bump. "Respect, man."